Welcome to Show Studio's live panel discussions, where experts from across the industry come together to talk about the most important Fashion Week shows of the season. Today, we'll be talking about the Collina Strada Fall/Winter 2022 collection. But first, let's watch this short video for some context.
Collina Strada is a sustainable fashion brand based in New York, designed by Hilary Taymor, who launched the label in 2008 in LA. Combining deadstock, upcycled materials and vintage aesthetics with modern design, many of the prints are created in-house. With eco-fabrications at their core, the Collina Strada brand now describes itself as being a platform for social issues and awareness, working every season to become closer to being fully sustainable. Collections defy trends, and in autumn-winter 21, Collina Strada became the first fashion brand to partner with the resale site The Real Real. A sense of humour and fun is also at the heart of the brand, from their playful prints to tongue-in-cheek campaigns and shows, such as models walking backwards down the runway. Previous seasons have seen the brand create video games and virtual lookbooks, also hosting an outdoor farmers market to educate guests on food waste. In short, it's about being eco-conscious but also having fun. Photographer Charlie Engman joined as co-creative director after initially working for the brand as an intern, and the lookbook for the Resort 2020 collection featured his mother. The brand have built an inclusive and eclectic community around them. In September 2021, they became one of 13 designer brands to be carried in the concept store Gucci Vault, having created the Collina Land video game for Gucci's film festival earlier that year. With the Kering brand's stamp of approval, Collina Strada is setting an example for even the biggest brands in the industry.
Amazing. So that's super exciting. If everybody didn't know, my name is Ryan Finn. I'm a sustainable fashion designer and writer here in New York, and I'm also a content creator about sustainable fashion. We're here with our lovely panelists, and I'm excited to hear from all of them, and they can introduce themselves. We can start with Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie Engman, and as the video said, I co-creative direct Collina with Hilary Taymor. So that's why I'm here. I also kind of have a sort of other career as a fashion photographer and an artist with my own personal practice.
Amazing. We can go to Ursula, if you would, please.
Hi, I'm Ursula de Castro. Interestingly, I'm one of the early waves upcyclists. I had a brand which I started in 1997, and I've upcycled for the likes of Topshop, Speedo, and Robe di Kappa. I was the co-founder and co-curator of Aesthetica, the sustainable fashion area at London Fashion Week between 2006 and 2014. I'm a mentor to other upcyclists such as Christopher Rayburn, Bethany Williams, Matthew Needham, Germanier. I am the co-founder and creative director at Fashion Revolution, which is a global campaign with a presence in 94 countries globally. And recently, I've just published my first book, Loved Clothes Last, which has been translated into Italian and into French.
Amazing. And Nick, we'd love to hear.
Hi, my name is Nick Palmer, and I am a sustainable menswear designer based here in London. Yeah.
Amazing. I feel like we have the perfect panel to be able to talk about sustainability, especially pertaining to this show. So what would be everybody's initial thoughts on the show? I was really happy to see it and everything Collina Strada does, just because I love reframing sustainability through different lenses than the boring, like old hemp bag, which no shade to the hemp bag. We love a hemp bag, but like, kind of boring, drab, eco, earth toned, old form of sustainable fashion, only because I think it contributes to like the concept of sustainability. Like pushing fashion forward to me is sustainable, and existing outside the confines of past conceptions of sustainability is important. So what was everybody's initial thoughts on the show? Or if we can hear from Charlie about, the concept of the show and how it contributes to sustainability at large, that would be fab.
Yeah, I sort of recuse myself of commenting on the show itself. I'll let you guys.
Okay, no worries. No worries. That's fair enough. I would love to hear from Ursula then next.
So the aesthetic really grabs me. I remember, when you do upcycle, you have to make the most of very, very little things that are forgotten and discarded, and you have to fall in love with them. So this juxtaposition, which I struggled with, because literally when I was a designer, it was all black deco, white, black deco, beige, whatever, but it wasn't sustainable. So this riot of color, riot of textures speaks to me. And I believe it also reiterates not just a point that I don't use the word sustainable when describing a designer. I would call them upcyclists or just designers. But you see, to somebody that has a trained eye, any of those pieces speaks as much as a slogan t-shirt, because we know that they're made of bits and pieces. So the only thing I can say from looking at the brand, which the aesthetic is amazing, I'd like a little bit more accuracy in the way that it's described, because I think it could be much stronger if it used a language that was less maybe timid. It could go more out with it, but the aesthetic is interesting to me, and the concept is also very, very familiar.
Totally. Yeah. I think the concept is incredible. And I'd love to hear from Nick, especially as, a designer who does this and also creates a lot of forward fashion that changes the way that we think about, green consciousness.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think that's the context and what it was referencing. It was kind of lovingly a little bit cringe to me, because I remember it so vividly that it feels like I'm like, oh my God, are we back there? But it's being done with such a wonderful sense of humor and of vibrancy that I really, really appreciated that. And, and also that it is self-aware in what it's saying, and what the industry and what being sustainable is that it is about, we're trying to be as close to sustainable as we can, but it is a conversation. It's a process that we have to continue going towards, but doing it in a way that also isn't, the sort of usual beige ideas that when we think of sustainable design is where we usually go,
Totally. I totally agree. Yeah. And I think Collina Strada does a really good job at using the brand as a platform rather than just like pushing forward like fashionable clothes. I think that's interesting. How much do we feel like it's the responsibility of different brands to exist as platforms for like ethics and sustainability and kind of those messagings? How much do we feel like it's responsibility of the brand, or do we feel like that's the responsibility of consumers to shop at different places that meet each of those needs? I'd love to hear from Ursula.
So we, at Fashion Revolution, we run an initiative which is called Fashion Open Studio. Anybody interested at Fashion Open Studio, where we work with a cohort of over 70 international designers from literally everywhere around the planet, each working in a way that is mindful, sustainable, regenerative, upcycling, or just creating systems, not necessarily collections. So I think that what we need really is this concept of giving as much visibility as we possibly can. That's actually running on screen. Thank you for showing it. It's our present initiative at the eLab. It's called A Showcase with a Difference. We have from artist Dr. Noki, one of the true pioneers, to some of the youngest real voices in this field. Some of these designers occasionally come to me and say, should I be making product? Haven't we got too much product? And what I really want to say loud and clear is, yes, you do need to keep making product. You are not the guys that need to slow down. There's a huge mainstream world outside of that that's kind of overstayed its welcome in many ways. It's producing too much. It's taking up too much space. So I really want to see brands that make their platforms available to other brands like them. In order safety and numbers, we need to reach those customers that are ready for a change. And I'm really sorry to have to tell you, and I'm going to disagree with everybody here, I've not seen any boring beige in years. So I'm telling you guys, check it out, because boring beige, we're just about to revive it, as you were saying. Nothing against the hemp bag. Trust me, the hemp bag is going to be the hit bag, the it bag of next season. But really, honestly, the problem is that people just aren't curious enough. And you get a whole bunch of designers getting together, people will become more curious.
Absolutely. And I think that all of your efforts like Fashion Revolution, and you've spoken so much about how like there's accessible apps for customers to be able to see what are their values and how are they being reflected by different brands. But like I said, I like that Collina Strada kind of meets the needs of a lot of different things as far as like the food waste, renting property for like doing shows, doing presentations that aren't so wasteful and things like that. And I always just wonder like how much do consumers know about fashion and sustainability and the ethics around it versus how much is it the responsibility of the brands to bring that to them? Nick, I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, I think it's like for me, it can be kind of difficult because as someone who does look at sustainability and also is a bit more on like, I guess the inside of being part of it, you kind of have to go, you know, how could someone not be aware of something? And I think that I think that to people who don't know, it can be a really, really intimidating thing to try to get started into. And you get very overwhelmed very quickly when you start really thinking about every little thing that happened that you do or you buy or your spending habits. And instead of just maybe focusing on like a smaller part and just sort of going like, just like as they were saying in the video about like, we're working towards being sustainable. Everything is a process. You're not going to wake up and be fully that, but you know, just maybe making small changes, I think is such an important thing to try to do. And just sort of look at the way that you're living and sort of make just like just simple changes. I think is sort of a good way of starting because it can be overwhelming and scary.
Definitely. Charlie, I'd love to hear how the creative like direction, the creative aspect of Collina Strada affects like the relatability of its audience and how you're able to like bring people into some of the messaging around like sustainability and ethics.
Yeah, well, to sort of piggyback on sort of the earlier things that you were talking about too, I think one thing that, you know, Hillary and I think a lot about and kind of struggle with constantly and sort of try to sort of illustrate the struggle too through what we do is, yeah, thinking about, okay, both of us are creative individuals who want to make things and sort of crave novelty and like producing things. That's sort of like that's part of who we are. So how can we sort of balance that with this idea of overconsumption, overproduction? Can you make something? Is it okay to make things, right? The question that is being posed. And if it is, then under what conditions is it okay to make things? And so thinking through, yeah, questions of scale and questions of values and ethics. And one kind of concept that, you know, keeps occurring to me and is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially in the context of fashion, is just this idea of enough. Like, when have we reached an idea of enough? You know, a lot of we get asked a lot at Collina, you know, are we happy with the sort of present size and scale and kind of, you know, and this sort of maybe will lead to the question that you asked immediately, but yeah, like I think questions of scale, like how fast we grow the brand, in what ways we grow the brand, that's something that you know, that I think is our responsibility as a brand, is to think about those things. Yeah, so to answer your other question, I think that question of scale is also related to how we kind of bring people into the creative aspect of the brand and kind of build the community through the brand. Is, you know, we keep it very interpersonal. We try to build relationships with the people that we work with, obviously, because we are excited about doing new things and trying things and pushing our boundaries and limits. We'll, you know, every season we'll bring in new people and we'll try things out, and sometimes it doesn't work and sometimes it works really well. And when it does work really well, those people we try to kind of bring back in, and we also try to give them, you know, make it, as you were saying also earlier, like treat it as a platform rather than having a very strict idea of what we're trying to do. And we try to keep a little bit of an openness and say, like, here, we're clearly proposing something. We clearly have a point of view and we have certain values, and we're trying to be as transparent as we can about what our values are and what our point of view is. But within that, you know, that's a pretty open landscape for a lot of other possibilities to happen and a lot of other people to participate. And actually, other people's participation is the joy. Like, we don't, you know, we're making things for people to wear and for people to interpret and reinterpret. And, you know, also, as Nick was mentioning, you know, we have a sort of very strong relationship to nostalgia and things that we related to at one time and trying to then bring them back, you know, which is also related to upcycling, trying to re-enliven things that maybe were kind of dead or in the past. So yeah, just trying to kind of retain that sort of openness, which I think is very much related to a kind of collaborative approach. The question of like whether the consumer is responsible or the brand is responsible. I mean, the real answer is that everybody is responsible for their actions. Like the responsibility is shared. And so the sharing is kind of the main point for us in the brand. And yeah, so that's the main ethos that we're trying to operate under.
Definitely. I love that. I think everybody can kind of sense the feeling of community and exchange. And I think that sense of familiarity plays into like wanting to care about the earth and wanting to care about like the ethics around fashion. So I think that's really important and very, very apt. I was also wondering, I think we're talking a lot about nostalgia and referencing like the past. And when I think about vintage fabrics and like the history of fashion, it makes me think about in the past, we've seen sort of more eco-aligned brands do this weird like co-opting of different kind of aesthetics, like homeless chic, which I don't like to say that or reference houseless people in that way, but like homeless chic or like the dystopian attitudes. We've seen that in like anti-fashion designers who are trying to like pose a statement about like the culture at large. What do we think about high fashion co-opting some of those aesthetics and what the cultural impact of that is, even if their intention is to make a social commentary about like us destroying the planet? I would love to hear from Ursula about this.
Do you?
Yeah.
Worried about actually saying what I feel. Right, okay. I think that the mainstream brand, we can't even say that they co-opt. I mean, to me, they're pretty much empty shells right now when it comes to this conversation. And the reason why they are empty shells is because they're so big and so part of the system that anything that they can do, as you say, is co-opting an aesthetic. That means putting a couple of plasters on a seeping wound, but not dealing really with the problems. Now, I'm not going to go into details. Some do it better than others. Some do it more than others. But the reality is that we need to understand that the importance here is not upscale, is replication. The reason why we've got this problem is that we've got dinosaurs in our midst and mammals get squashed. So what we need to do is to really not talk necessarily. I mean, the brands are co-opting an aesthetic, don't they always? I mean, they're meant to be the ones putting things first, but aren't they always slightly the ones that get last? After all, the real innovation comes from the bottom up. So we are from the bottom up, because we genuinely believe that that is where aesthetic comes from. Smaller size can come genuine sustainable solutions, ethical solutions, social solutions, environmental solutions. So when I look at the brand, I look at them as a kind of a mirror. And the fact that they are co-opting these aesthetics tells me that these aesthetics have won, that we have won. So ultimately, the need for a visibility for the industry to take this matter seriously, that's where we are now. Whether they're co-opting it, of course, I can show you the ones that do it for real.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always think about, I wonder how the public feels about like larger brands taking on missions of sustainability and if they feel like they could even be a resolution. Sometimes I feel like people are already defeated by it when they see like a huge fast fashion brand, for example, doing a collaboration with an artist to make like sustainable merch or something that comes out. I'm always like, do they feel like that's a resolution, or are they like, do they feel inhibited by it as if like they already do so much bad, it doesn't really outweigh it? I think any contribution is meaningful, but I'm wondering from Nick, how do you feel about how this resurgence in the interest in like green consciousness and sustainability relates to the secondhand market competing with like high fashion market, competing with independent designers? Like, where can we find resolution there?
I mean, I think that obviously, like, there is, now that we're learning the best place to shop is in our own closets because we already have purchased these things. But then when those needs of those certain pieces are no longer fulfilling the purpose that you originally needed them for, then altering them is a good option. And then from there, you can just keep going. But when you're going from like secondhand to designer, is that even remotely on the same conversation, especially if it's like a new designer item? And now I feel like, is it a designer item or is it a very, very expensive branded item that actually has this insane markup that isn't really a part of it? Doesn't really make sense as to why you would even go there. And so it's we're sort of in this very, I think we're in a really interesting place in fashion, but then also I feel like you need to really be asking really question what it is that you're buying into when you're buying into fashion at this point. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I think it's hard for people to like find resolutions like internally in themselves and like find out what their value systems are in order to like make decisions about shopping. And I think that the more like information people have, the more power that they have. So I'm wondering from Charlie. Okay, so when Collina Strada makes designs, especially with the recent collaborations and things like that, how do you feel like that contributes to the culture at large compared to the rise of like things like fast fashion and like overproduction and consumption? How does it feel to like be able to contribute to sustainable fashion in comparison? Because we've seen that year over year, unfortunately, fast fashion is like exponentially rising, even though the secondhand market is also rising, and even though sustainable fashion market is rising. How do you feel contributing to sustainable fashion, knowing that fast fashion is still rising exponentially?
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation is so kind of complicated and interesting and confusing for me, because obviously all these things, they're happening simultaneously and everybody is taking from everybody. Like high fashion is taking from the houseless population, as you already mentioned. Everything is sort of intertwining, and I think there's some idea that like things are actually compartmentalized or should be compartmentalized in some way, and that's just not actually how humans are, and that like everything is everyone is taking from everything all the time, constantly, especially when it comes to creativity. The sources of those things, that it's that's like an energy, and it's all about context and things like that. So yeah, for me it's really just about, for us, we have values that are really kind of oriented towards care and community and trying to like mitigate, like I like things, and how can I make things and do them well? You know what I mean? Like that's my main concern. And so in making a brand, I think we kind of landed on, obviously sustainability, or the question of the environment, is just a huge topic that we're all sort of grappling with constantly. And so for us, it just made sense. That's something that we were constantly thinking about and consumed with in our own processes of making. So it just made sense for us to sort of channel it through what we were doing in the brand. And it was also just kind of an easy way for us to sort of like actually structure what we're doing and have some orientation towards what we're making. Because as kind of messy creative individuals, Hillary and I, it's easy to kind of go off into outer space. So it's nice to have something very grounded and something that can be shared and we can kind of does kind of naturally include everybody. The environment, for example, is something that like no matter across social class, across all the different sort of like identifications that anyone could have, that's something that we do actually all share, and is easy for us to actually talk about in a certain type of way. So that's sort of why the brand is so kind of specifically oriented there. And then of course, like it's very easy to become neurotic about those things, because there's once you start thinking about it, you open the sort of like matryoshka of like craziness and responsibility, and the more you learn about it, the kind of more horrifying it becomes. So for us, we try to make it kind of funny and self-aware and self-referential and kind of goofy, as just almost a kind of coping mechanism to the sort of like schizophrenia and neuroses that can be caused when you kind of really try to invest yourself in solutions that are naturally bigger than an individual or bigger than an individual company or brand. So basically us being a brand kind of contributing to sort of sustainability communication or sustainability, the landscape of sustainability. I mean, we're contributing to it as much as like H&M or whatever. We're just contributing it in the opposite end of the value system. You know what I mean? So for us, it's like, it's all kind of part of the soup, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, you talk about orienting the brand. I'm wondering, do you feel like there's any area of sustainability at large that feels unaddressed or underdeveloped that you try to like tackle or bring forward?
I do think that this supply chain it's discussed a lot, but the actual like the human aspect of sustainability, I think it's harder for people to sort of really it's weirdly easier for people to care about, you know, polar bears and the trees than it is to care about other human beings somehow. It's sort of like the notion of the environment and sustainability sometimes becomes a bit of abstract or sort of romanticized in this kind of way. And yeah, there's actually a lot of people, human beings, who are directly affected by, you know, overproduction or even just environmental changing. And weirdly, you know, that's sort of like always sort of understated, or sort of that's kind of maybe assumed that that's what people are caring about, but it's never really the thing that is actually directly talked about. So, you know, and I think there's good reason for why it's hard to talk about, because it's actually really hard to sort of like visualize in a certain type of way, how the supply chain works, who makes what, how much time or resources or material is put into what. That's actually really hard to communicate in a very kind of digestible and easy way. And so that's something that, you know, I'm constantly trying to think about how to, think clearly through actually all the different people who are involved and affected in the processes.
Definitely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I remember I was reading from an independent designer that just graduated from CSM, Faustine Steinmetz, about how there's so many areas of sustainability that people don't really think about, like putting pressure on independent or emerging designers to be sustainable, and not realizing that they may not have access to certain kinds of like sustainable textiles, which I know that now, and I know that Collina Strada works with a company that does like give limitless amounts of like sustainable textiles. But like when you're an emerging designer, it can be difficult to access sustainable textiles and then use them, even if they are dead stock, because they might have a minimum quantity of ordering. And then most of the public doesn't know about minimum quantities of ordering textiles and things like that. So I'd love to hear from Ursula. Do you feel like there's an area in fashion, especially relating to sustainability, that's underdeveloped? I know in the past you've shifted from the focus on transparency over to like some more areas of like sustainable fashion that people could consider.
It's actually really amazingly simple. So we've been talking about intersectionality before the word intersectionality meant an intersection, but we've always been about transparency, as we've always been about the environment. You cannot talk about one without the other. So what's missing in this conversation is understanding that the problem is at source. And the problem is the way that this industry deliberately designed itself. And this industry, from industrialization, deliberately designed itself to exploit people and nature. So the two things go hand in hand. If you're protecting nature, you're protecting all nature's creatures. That's humans too. And if you're protecting humans, and if you're treating them with dignity, and if ever we decided that we could treat each other as equals, then you would find that our working environment, our villages, our communities, our shared environment is taken care of at the same time. So the division between those who say, I am for the environment or I am for social, is really a conversation that is really missing a beginning and missing an end, because there is no distinction between the two. So that's what's missing. It's missing to see this as a global problem, as a full picture, and deriving the enthusiasm of wanting to make a difference. I mean, I always say it, if you genuinely understand the impact of your clothing, you can start having fun diminishing it. And that is what I believe a lot of these young designers are doing, because, you know, let's not take the word out of the other word. I mean, you know, fashion is what we wear. Some of us want to wear with joy. Some of us don't want to wear with restrictions all the time. So these creative solutions that take into consideration the full picture, because when you're smaller, the full picture is visible. You know how much you're paying your team. You know when your team is upset. You know where you've hidden the last fabric from your latest collection. That's your tiny microcosm. You make it bigger, but it's always united.
Definitely. I love that. And I love the emphasis on like creative solutions. I'd love to hear from Nick, especially as, you know, someone who's doing this yourself, where you feel like you find creative resolutions to address like the lacuna of, you know, issues as far as like sustainability in fashion.
I mean, I think that that's, you know, as sort of what we've been discussing, when you are a small label, you are really able to you know what's going on, and you should know what's going on. And that was something that, like, with my own work, that was really important. And figuring out how to navigate that, and sort of making conscious decisions on how to set it up. Was it going to be something where we're considering manufacturing somewhere else? How are we sourcing materials, and what are we sourcing, and what are the criteria that we're going to use to build it, and also allow us to continue to grow at a pace that we're satisfied with, and sort of go, okay, well, we're not going to say that we understand everything about sustainability, because everything keeps changing, and we keep learning new things, and there's new materials and ways of processing things that are going to happen. But we're comfortable with looking at, like, really investigating upcycling, or really wanting to make sure that the fabrics that we use that are dead stock are actually fully dead stock, and not just a greenwash term just like put onto something. Okay, well, we can manage that, and then we can start looking into hardwares, and just sort of keep trying to question and understand and grow as we continue doing this, because it is a process. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that. And I feel like I'm wondering from you, where do you feel like, other than panels like this, where do you feel like the public can access discussions like this, where they can hear from designers about where they have areas of opportunity to be more sustainable, or things like that? Like, how can the public hear more about this, or what kind of exchange can they have with designers if they may not have the platform that, like, Collina Strada has and is continuing to build with their audience?
Me personally, I mean, I think a lot of it is that I looked at what other designers were doing, and also platforms like Fashion Revolution were also helpful in sort of things to think about.
Yep.
And also, I tend to, just maybe sort of just sort of question something. I think that if something seems a little bit too good to be true as far as a deal on what something costs, then maybe really doing a bit of research and sort of backtracking and thinking about what this piece represents. And so then when you think about how many people need to get a piece of the pie off of that t-shirt or whatever, how much did it actually cost to make? And if it just doesn't hit your ear right, maybe think about it.
Can I interject
Yes.
1 second on this?
Yeah, of course.
What I think it's really, really changed is the attitude of designers with each other. So when I was a designer at London Fashion Week, the competition was horrendous. You couldn't ask people where they produced, what their fabric. It was just, my world is just separate from yours. Right now, at least my learning with the Fashion Open Studio cohort is this kind of peer-to-peer desire to share. And I feel that that is the greatest education that young designers can get, is to actually be with each other and share from each other. Thank you so much for mentioning Fashion Revolution, because we know we had that bit of that. But just the fact that we're here and that there's two designers, for me, is a very, very valuable way to share information.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Fashion Revolution is like a huge platform for everybody, and all the different initiatives that have brought sustainability to everybody globally, I think obviously shaped the way that we're talking about sustainable fashion right now.
The wrong fashion. What's Fashion Revolution you're showing?
Or are they on the Instagram?
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yep.
No worries. I'd love to hear from Charlie. When we were just talking about communicating with other designers, I feel like the collaborations that Collina Strada has done recently, especially with Levi's and the Gucci, I feel like that brings sustainability to a broader audience. What do you think about the importance of collaboration in fashion as far as ethics?
Yeah, well, I think maybe like I intimated earlier, I mean, collaboration is essential, and it's kind of happening whether you want it or not. And it's more about sort of accepting it, or sort of embracing it and sort of working with it rather than trying to resist it or work against it. I mean, you can't make things, especially in the fashion context, you can't make things without help. You are necessarily working with other people, and I can say this really from, Hillary and I try to do everybody's job. We're there, we're doing sewing, we're doing dyeing, we're making the content. As a photographer too, I'm making the visuals. We're trying to do everyone's job, and it's just not possible,
Right.
So we have to build a team of people that we really trust and respect. And sometimes we have to take risks on who we collaborate with, and really do our best to kind of communicate ahead of time and throughout the process to make sure that we're aligned. But yeah, I mean, collaboration is the key. And that's why I, also was trying to put an emphasis on the supply chain, because necessarily you're also going to have to collaborate with people that you don't necessarily have the opportunity to interface with sometimes. There's certain things that like we can't produce in places that we can access that we want to produce, but we want to make sure that it's, at least, it's aligned with our ethics and values and is something that it's okay. And also, again, with this idea of enough, there's some things that we really want to make that sometimes we have to just take a second and be like, I don't know how to make that and make it okay. Maybe we can make one of them. It's for the show. We make one single version of it and we just don't produce it. And so it's fine, and that happens a lot. I mean, collaboration, once you kind of like lean into collaboration and embrace collaboration, it's just like, how would you even want to work in any other way? You learn so much and you have so much, you're capable of, your capacity for making things and doing things and expressing things just exponentially grows the more you bring in. And obviously, we've been discussing this question of scale, which is really important. I do think that there's enough for how many people you bring into collaboration, because you have to have kind of interpersonal care with people. You have to be able to kind of communicate and have them communicate back, and that has to be manageable. So at some point, you can kind of over collaborate. You can kind of bring in too many people, and it becomes too many chefs in the kitchen, or whatever the expression you want to use, and then that becomes really unmanageable. And I think in places like that, that's where it becomes really easy to do things that are against your value, maybe without even realizing it, because you're overstretched. You're not actually caring. You don't have the capacity to actually care for all the parts that you're engaging with and all the people that you've kind of brought into the process. So for us, we just do a lot of work trying to like check in with who we're working with and how we're working, and make sure that actually we make the ideas and things we're trying to express, making sure that there are possible ways to do that. So to talk specifically too about like the collaborations we've done, like with Gucci and Levi's and whatever. Levi's, for example, denim is a huge, negative contributor to environmental and human and supply chain problems. And, there's a lot of sustainability questions and issues with denim production. So when we were working with Levi's, which is one of the largest denim producers, thinking about, okay, how can we make this make sense for us if it's something that we can do? And also, I think questions, this is also sort of circulating in the conversation, is like, okay, if we need resources, we basically need money to keep going too. So if like they're going to offer us an opportunity to like A, reach a bigger audience, and B, also just get funds to kind of help produce what we're doing, how do we manage those, the kind of needs, the practical needs versus our values? So when Levi's approached us and we tried to figure that out, we were like, okay, well, you must have a lot of unsold, already produced garments that we can then kind of interpret and work with. And by doing that, then naturally we're already reaching an audience that they've built who doesn't care about sustainability. They care about jeans or whatever they care about, whatever's bringing them to Levi's. Like we're already then naturally just like put in front of them by having that relationship. So by taking care of our own kind of values and watching our own P's and Q's basically, and working really hard to say like, yes, we will collaborate with you under these conditions. This is where my boundary is. This is where my enough is. I think that is like bringing people in who are not necessarily interested, or maybe even are maybe somehow antagonistic to the messages of sustainability or whatever. We can say like, hey, you don't have to care. Actually, you can have whatever you want, the thing that you want or the thing that you find desirable. And it can also be done in these other ways. And you don't actually have to like take on the burden of having to think about it. And your end of the responsibility can kind of come somewhere else. So working with bigger brands like Gucci and Levi's, I think is like, there's a great opportunity to talk to people who are not there, already arriving at the idea of like, I want to have this discussion. They're not coming to this panel, because anyone who's coming to this panel is already like, sustainability, that's something I'm curious about, or something I've been thinking about. Let me learn more. In those, when you have a different question of scale, you catch people who like, when they hear the word sustainability, they don't know what it means, or like roll their eyes. Also, I don't know what it means either, so that's fine. But so I think there's just definitely opportunity there, and it's more from our end, just keeping track of it and having really honest and open communications with the people we work with at those companies to make sure that it's done in a way that isn't going to go against our kind of core values or the processes that we've already set up for ourselves.
Definitely. Love that. I love the concept of like community and collaboration. And it brings me back to the show. Thinking about the casting in the show, I feel like a lot of familiar faces, not just at like in the presentation, like in the video, but like at every show, it seems like very familiar and very community oriented. And I think that that's really cool. So I'd love to hear from Nick. What do you think about the kind of like diverse casting that just looks like regular real life people that you would see who are beautiful?
They're all pretty extraordinary looking, I think. But no, I think the casting was great. I did really love seeing Whitney Port have a minor cameo and then go a little. The repetition of "I'm obsessed" was wonderful. No, I think like also I actually have to say like I really like being able to sort of. I like that you guys continue to work with the same models over and over again, and then just sort of you don't seem to get rid of any muses. You just sort of add new ones, which I think is a really beautiful like collective way of working with people. And you do show a wonderful diverse group in casting, and I think that is something that should, you know, having to have when especially because I feel strange answering the question because it being cisgender white male and talking about inclusivity and like feeling reflected in things. I would say like if I was in a different place, being able to see yourself reflected in something I think is a really wonderful thing. And I think I think that you guys do that really beautifully, and you work with really great people who also must really like working with you because they keep coming back. And I think that's a wonderful triumph, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, I definitely think it's like a testament to community. I think it's so beautiful. And sorry for saying normal looking. I just think like sometimes people get upset when they see like diverse casting as if that isn't how the world looks. Like disabled people are real, Black people are real, trans people are real. We're here, we're everywhere. So I hate when people are confused about any kind of casting that isn't exclusive and like intentionally not representative. I love representative casting. I'd love to hear from Ursula. How do you feel about like the casting in the show? And how it like reflects real world attitudes and how they.
I feel intelligent casting is actually fundamental, and I think we had a really interesting juxtaposition this year with two of the heritage brands. I mean, just look at the Chanel with the horse and nobody remembering that jacket, and Valentino, who actually totally took the opposite catwalk and really showcased the clothes, and you could see the clothes were singing. You remembered the clothes because you remember the person as well, and it wasn't just a celebrity. So for me, it's incredibly important to cast in a way that people can see themselves. I have, to be honest with you, found, I was born in the end of the 60s, and I've witnessed fashion 70s, 80s, 90s, and I promise you, there was only ever one person. She was white, she was tall, she was skinny, and she was blonde, and she was young, and that's it. This is the whole of womanhood. I find that really insulting because woman is so many more other things, including the diversity and the lot. And I feel that, with fashion, it is important that we show it on people that we can relate to. It's certainly much more generous, and it's definitely much more interesting to look at, I think.
Definitely. I think it's interesting. And I also think it contributes to the concept of sustainability. I think like we were saying, what really is sustainability? Who knows? Why are we here talking about it? Just kidding. But I think that sustainability is hard to conceptualize, but I do think showing fashion on people of all ages, like as Collina Strada does consistently, like on babies, on children, having homeware, having seniors, having people who are young, having it represented across all ages shows that there's longevity to the clothes, which is an important aspect of sustainable design. I think I learned from Fashion Revolution that most clothes stay in your closet for like 1 to 3 years. To me, that kind of longevity is not long enough. And when you see that it can stay with you from childhood to adulthood to any age, like across any range of ages, to me, that's about sustainable praxis. And I think that that's an area of sustainability that has gone unaddressed, which is what I really like. I feel like there's so many like different facets of Collina Strada that address sustainability like subtly without like beating you over the head and saying like, this is what you can do. It just shows like community and collaboration is a part of sustainability, an essential part of sustainability. I also wanted to get into some of the specific looks. Any favorite looks? I know Charlie's not going to contribute to this section, but did anybody have any favorite looks? I love look 30. If we can pull them up. Sorry, I forgot to ask for that before. Yes, I think that this is fabulous. I feel like this can go for, like, I can see this on a performer, but I can also see this on someone just walking around in Soho, but I also could see this to get my groceries, to hope to pick someone up at Trader Joe's. Like, you know, it's fun.
Yeah.
The spirit of it is fun.
I love the idea of someone wearing this to Trader Joe's. Please, someone do that.
I'll be the first. I will be the first.
Ready, anytime.
Right? I think it's fab. Yeah, I like the use of the textiles. I didn't realize until I looked at some of like really up close images how many different like layered textiles sometimes are used. I think with internet imagery, things can get kind of flat and it doesn't really look like a lot is happening. But thinking about the dynamic different uses of like color, textile, print, it kind of gets lost online. So I loved like some of the close-ups of the different layering. Nick, did you have any favorite like aspects of the looks?
Yeah, I thought that the micro minis, I thought that was a really fun bit, especially with the indie sleeves off kiltered belt wearing. I really just got like, it really did just remind me of middle school quite a bit, which was quite fun. Yeah, I think that I loved the green shirt in the first look. And then the fringy pieces that were made out of sort of the refuse that you found in the studio, I think, was sort of those pieces, the shredded ones. I really quite enjoyed that. Also,
yeah, to comment on those are we've been working with for a long time with this NGO, the OR Foundation, where we source secondhand T-shirts that were originally we sourced them directly from Ghana, where they had ended up. But we try now to source them before they even get to Ghana so that we don't have to do this back and forth. And so these are all kind of refuse secondhand T-shirts that then we have been upcycling and turning into other things. But naturally, you get a lot of like, you still have to cut the T-shirts and reinterpret them. So you get a lot of scraps. So a lot of that stuff that's what, you know, like this, well, it's gone, but it's like a big blanket kind of shawl thing that's just made out of all the stuff that we couldn't kind of otherwise use. Yeah, this one, for example. So yeah, a lot of the like shredded stuff that you're mentioning. But anyway, just a comment on how it's actually.
No, thank you. Yeah, there was one piece that I've been trying to locate because I've read about it. Which are the trousers that were done using sprinkles? Because I just thought that was such a cool.
Oh yeah, okay, that's towards the end. I don't know the number look, but it's towards the end of the collection. That one, go up. It's like directly above the final look. Whatever, I can't read. Whatever number. Nope. Next one. Following look. That one. Yeah, those pants were dyed with sprinkles.
I think that's such a fun thing. My only question was like, how did it attract? Was because are sprinkles wax or are they sugar? I was just trying to think if they would attract
both. I think
animals like bugs.
Yeah, I don't know. These are that we were thinking. These are one of those things where it's like, this is us having fun and figuring it out, but maybe we don't produce the sprinkles.
No, I think it's fun.
Maybe sprinkles cannot be scaled.
We did a bunch of sleeves using the Speedo gussets from, you know, obviously they were unworn swimsuits, but nevertheless it was the gusset. And I remember thinking, all right, there you go. I mean, it was perfect. They were very almost medieval looking, you know, like this with all the gaps in between. But I thought if I'm starting to tell people that their sleeves are gussets, I don't think I'm going to sell them very much. So we did only one gusset sleeve.
I love that. I feel like the show is really well received in large part because of the production. I'd love to hear from Charlie about like the nature of like producing things like this and how it can relate to sustainability. Sometimes people feel like sustainable fashion is weird because we do a lot of production in fashion and spend so much money and time and fuel on planes and things like that to do a fashion show and then say it's sustainable. So I'm wondering how like doing these more creative community-based productions affects the presentation.
I mean, I will say production is a nightmare. You know, it's like it's, you know, it's part of the thing and it's, you know, but it's a lot to deal with. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you mean in terms of production. There's so many aspects of production. Obviously, there's making the clothes and then there's making the shows and all the other things that have to go on with it. You know, it's kind of relentless. There's so many different tendrils of production that you have to contend with. Because obviously, yeah, producing the clothes, I think we've kind of addressed a lot about, you know, what goes into the production of clothes. You have to work with people, seamstresses and people, and that's a supply chain question. And then material questions, you know, we're trying to work with dead stock or reusing things, or the fabrics that we do create that are original. We try to do those in good ways. Like this shirt that I'm wearing, this is original print that I designed. So we can't put that on dead stock necessarily. So we try to think of like eco dye processes and also fabrics that were made out of like waste products. So this is made out of the cellulose from roses. That's that kind of off casting of the flower production industry. So yeah, you can break down the fibers in discarded rose petals and then make this really beautiful and like really kind of luxe fabric out of it. So whatever, that's the production side of like the actual garments. The production of the shows is that's where I was like, it's a nightmare, because I'm just coming out of like you know, several endless weeks basically at this point of like not really sleeping and not really doing anything but working. So I know it's a lot to manage. It's a lot. And then there's you know, because it's a sort of industry and everything sort of like is built around a structure that pre-exists. And that structure is really what we're contending with. You know, even talking about casting, to go back to that earlier conversation, you know, people have been really acculturated to a very specific structure of casting and what we expect. And there's a lot of, it's just easy to get the type of like model that we imagine a model is, because there's so many systems that have been built around to support that. And while you would think it would be easy to cast people who are kind of quote unquote normal or sort of diverse, there actually isn't a lot of infrastructure to have that happen. You know, we work a lot with, you know, Aaron Rose Phillips, for example, who has cerebral palsy. And like, there just is so little infrastructure that supports her. And like, it's, you know, it's actually harder to work with her than it is to work with, you know, other like more kind of conventional models. And, you know, that actually requires, there's more production work on our side to make that work and accommodate her. And, you know, for us, we think that that's our responsibility, and we just want to do that. We love her, and, you know, we want to support her. And so we're willing to kind of do the extra work to make that happen. But that is about, you know, that's actually a production question. Sometimes it's actually just like, it is more work, and you have to go outside of sort of pre-existing systems to accommodate different types of needs and different types of bodies and people, and also different ideas. You know, for us this season, you know, coronavirus has been really, you know, really pushed at that as well, of having to really reframe how we communicate what we're trying to do, and how we bring in people, and how we collaborate with people too, because as we all know, you know, coronavirus has really affected how we can interface with other people, you know. And so and I realize this actually maybe wasn't stated at all in this conversation, so maybe people don't even know what we're talking about. But this show, we did a film. We did like a sort of a spoof episode of a reality TV show for our brand. And the reason that we did that is because, you know, when we were trying to put together the show and figure it out, that was in December that we were starting to concept that and orient ourselves towards that. And that was when there was a huge surge of Omicron, and it just didn't feel at the time appropriate for us to do something live, and we weren't sure how we were going to manage all these people in the spaces together. So we thought, you know, we have familiarity already from the 2 years that we've already been in this debacle of how to make digital shows. So, you know, that's kind of where we ended up making this. But then, of course, that's a lot of different production questions. We have to figure out how to make a TV show in kind of coronavirus time, as people who we're not TV people, you know, we're making clothes. So there's a lot of different kind of production questions that went into that. And that's what we love too, is that, you know, as difficult and kind of intense as it was, you know, I really wish I'd gotten a lot more sleep than I have through this whole process. But I also like really learned a lot of things and brought a lot of different people in. And also I really like that, you know, fashion shows are actually really exclusive. You have to be physically present, and you have to be invited. So you have to be someone who's already kind of like done the work to be part of the industry, and all the sort of complicated, you know, networking and whatever, you know, things that get involved in that. Here we can actually just, everyone's seeing the same thing. You know what I mean? Everyone gets like, it's as inclusive as we can be. So we actually really like doing these digital shows and doing things like this and producing things in this way. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. The production is something that we're constantly, because we're always trying new things as well as the production is always, it's always a lot for us to deal with, but it's part of, it's like such an essential part of what we're doing. So, you know, we try to just learn every time, and yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, I used the word production. I meant to say presentation. But yeah,
Okay,
I feel
yeah,
like,
okay. So you opened a can of
we're
worms.
on the same page.
You weren't ready
No,
for my.
sorry. No, you went there. You went there. I love it. No, and Nick, I feel like you've loved the presentation. Can we just get everybody's final thoughts on the show? We can start with Ursula, if you may.
Just riotous. I loved it. I love, to me, it reminded me of some of my favorite Baroque French artists, Boucher and Fragonard. And that kind of, that sense of, you know, but in a modern way. So I really, really loved the aesthetic. I hope we'll stay in touch. And yeah, I enjoyed, I really enjoyed it.
I love it. I love all these references. I feel like we're looking into the past as futurism, which is like my favorite part of sustainability.
Exactly.
Looking in the past as resolution for the future, for sure. And Nick, can we get your final thoughts?
Actually, I feel like I've been saying so much about it anyway. It's as you said, it's nice to like learn, you know, to go, you know, learning from the past to go forward. So for me, it was a much more positive experience than I would say that I actually had in middle school, getting to revisit it this way. And yeah, it was just lols. I don't even know if anyone says it anymore, but it was great. It's a good way to start this new year. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. And if you have any final thoughts on the contribution, Charlie?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy with this collection, how everything came out. It was very kind of, this one in particular was very kind of cathartic, for me at least. I'm not going to speak for Hillary at all because she's not here, but for me, it was very cathartic to just sort of like, you know, also when you watch the film, for anyone who hasn't seen it, you know, we're really going in on ourselves on it. We're really like spoofing ourselves, like, you know, and it was very cathartic to just like make fun of yourself and just be stupid, you know. That was actually really enjoyable and fun to do. And I'm really happy with how the collection came out. I think everything got integrated really well together. I'm very proud of what we managed to do this season. So yeah, final answer.
Amazing. Love that. I love seeing fashion as futurism. I love looking at it through the lens of community. And I feel like this was a great discussion. So thank you to all the panelists and our virtual audience for watching. For more extensive Fashion Week coverage, be sure to visit showstudio.com. And if you're watching from Show Studio's YouTube channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe below. And we will see you next time.